So I am epically bad at intros. It's kind of a running joke for us because I'm like really, it's like, essentially, if you ever listen to our show, 100% of the intros are something where I had to go back and re-record it afterwards. So please forgive any. Anyway, I'll go ahead and give it a shot.
There's a lot of trust involved in this because you're going to do an intro, and now we know that you re-record them. So you could go back and just be like, noted predator and Grand High Cleric of the KKK, Gary Butterfield and Kole Ross are here to,
They're here to tell us about their side hobby as opposed to their main work, which is killing children in public.
Yeah, lynching and killing. Yeah.
It is funny because I am wearing a robe. It is quite chilly here in Ohio.
Welcome to The Short Game. This is the show where we talk about short games, the kind of games that you can pick up and probably complete in an evening or a weekend. I'm your host, Reagan Kelly, and I am joined as always this week by my bro host and real-life twin brother, Shane. How you doing, Shane?
I'm just great. Bought me a new house.
Oh yeah, you did. You bought a house this week.
I did.
That's
I did.
awesome.
It's phenomenal. It's gonna have so much more room for my collectibles.
And this week is a really exciting one because this week I am joined by Gary Butterfield and Kole Ross of Watch Out for Fireballs. I think you probably heard me talk a little bit about Watch Out for Fireballs on the show before because it's one of my personal favorite gaming podcasts and probably one of the premier retro gaming podcasts on the internet. Gary Butterfield is a writer. He's also a musician, podcaster, of course, writes some good stuff about video games on the internet, and as I understand it, he lives in the Pacific Northwest. How are you doing, Gary?
I'm doing great, Reagan. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. And of course, we're also joined by Kole Ross. Kole is sort of the brains behind duckfeed.tv, a really great podcast network for video games and also for just general funny stuff. And as I understand it, he lives in Cincinnati?
Yes, Cincinnati, Ohio. Hi. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. How's Cincinnati this time of year?
Chilly. It is very chilly.
Cincinnati-style chili.
Oh, delicious.
Yeah, so it is red sauce poured haphazardly over noodles.
I have had that a couple of times, and I am deeply confused by it. I actually just moved from the Midwest out to sunny Mountain View, California, and it's been a big improvement. But the food has been lacking. I think maybe the Cincinnati chili is what I miss.
It's awful. It's an affront.
Reagan, they put French fries in their burritos out there.
For our listeners, if you haven't checked out Watch Out for Fireballs, which is a great retro gaming podcast, their format is a lot like ours in that they usually pick one game per episode and they dive into it in extraordinary depth. And what I love about the show is that they talk through the game level by level or stage by stage and talk about some of the great mechanics and details of the plot and other things about the game that really make it exceptional. They've been running since about 2011. So if you have a favorite game, there's actually a pretty good chance you can go back into their back catalog and listen to a show where two guys explain it in great detail. Clear your evening. Many of their episodes are pretty long. We'll hopefully come in a little under that time today. But yeah, they're really great. And of course, they're also on a couple of other great podcasts. If you check out duckfeed.tv, you can listen to their show Abject Suffering, which is another really cool show about worst video games ever. And another show that I don't listen to because I'm too much of a wimp for Dark Souls, Bonfireside Chat. So before we talk a little bit about your process with creating the podcast and how you guys got started, I think you're going to the Portland Retro Gaming Expo soon?
Yes.
Oh, 2 weeks. If you're in California now, it's a short little hop. It's fun. It's really fun. When I first moved out here, I found out that they had a Retro Gaming Expo, and I was really excited because that's my bailiwick. And it was just this tiny little thing out of a hotel conference room, and it's hence grown to this pretty sizable, thing. And they've added more panels and kind of entertainment and stuff as opposed to just being a big store. But it also functions as a big store, which is great because if there's anything you're looking for, you'll find it. It's really fun.
Are you guys big collectors of retro game stuff in addition to doing the show?
I really just kind of accumulate it as we go along. I wouldn't call it a collection, more so than just a shelf and also a Steam library. It's not intentional. It's just an accretion of games.
I consider my Steam library a epically curated collection. It's a
yeah. It with this high standards of anything that is less than 99 cents.
Exactly.
Yeah,
if it comes in a bundle.
Yeah, and like any collection, it's important to keep them in mint unplayed condition.
That's probably about 60% of my Steam library, at least. And that's part of the reason that we started this show, is to give me a reason to kind of cram through my backlog. And actually, the show's really helped a lot because it gives me a kind of a reason to look through my list and see which ones of these games I can knock out and help my overall percentage on my Steam played list. On a pretty recent episode, we did an interview with Dr. David Heineman, who's a guy who's...
He's a real doctor.
He's a real doctor. He teaches game theory and wrote a really good article for Kotaku a little while back about how he had played, I don't even remember, I think it was 400 games in 2 years or something like that. So he talked about his sort of process for getting through stuff, which is just way different from mine. But do you guys have a kind of a system for picking the games you feature on the show or the games you play otherwise? Is that a...
I'll say, I know that Kole has a slightly more, as far as actually managing the time, a little bit more involved, but I'll speak a little bit to how we pick the games, because I'm more involved in that step. But we're super conscious of that because we're playing on a deadline and we have these other shows that we do, and we both have actual lives outside the show.
What?
So yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, pick two is the thing we keep saying recently. Like if you choose, family, work, and a hobby, pick two. Like whenever you get presented with three choices, something's going to suffer. It's like The Novelist. Another short game I don't recommend. But
good. I'll scratch that off our list.
Yeah, it's not great. But so we're really conscious of length for things, and the way it expresses itself, I think, is we're both huge fans of JRPGs, at least growing up, and we really limit the number of those we do. Like we have the summer JRPG that we do, and that's it, because who has that kind of time to put 30 to 60 hours into a thing, especially when you're working on any kind of deadline and working on these other games at the same time. So it definitely influences our kind of process. Other than that, we just try to not do the same genres over and over. We try to limit, the series. Like we space out our Marios and our Resident Evils and stuff.
A big part of that is also kind of establishing a rhythm. So we try not to stack too many long games in a row. Or if we have one that's kind of a whopper coming up, we will try and put something a little bit shorter in there. And just over the years, we've, kind of established like, okay, in the fall, we're probably going to do like an adventure game and a survival horror game to get ready for a Western RPG. And that's really just the kind of the weight of tradition. But a big tool that we use to help actually is a great site called How Long to Beat.
Oh, we've been using that too. That is a phenomenal website.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like it's been around all that long. I only found out about it maybe 7 or 8 months ago. Like I didn't know about it when I first started this show.
When we talked to David Heineman, he was saying his project to play 400 games in 4.5 years, when he began that, there was no How Long to Beat. And I wonder how things would have been different for him if that had been around. But yeah, it's an invaluable tool. Do they have details going back to all the retro games that you guys enjoy playing?
It seems like the data for that is like, the older the game is, the less reliable the data is. There are kind of like fewer people who have voluntarily submitted scores, and sometimes the timekeeping isn't exactly that accurate. And they have a good way of like gauging that by color coding it and different kinds of things. But in general, it actually is, it serves at least as a rule of thumb to, to help us figure out Like, I don't know if Gary has a number in his head, but like ideally I would like to spend maybe like less than 10 hours a week playing a game. And that works out to, every other week when we do an episode, like, 20 hours is probably like maxing out at what we could cover in an episode for like content wise and also fitting it in.
How completionist are you? I mean, when I'm playing a retro game, I lean very heavily on things like save states, and that helps me get through things a little bit better. But when I'm playing a more modern game and I can't do something like that, I tend to kind of just experience the game up through where I feel like it has nothing more new to show me and then get out. Is that how you guys feel about it, or how do you feel about completing all the aspects of a game?
You can count on one hand, I think, the number of games that we haven't beaten for the show. We try to get to the end because we want to be able to talk about it, and we feel like we're kind of doing a disservice. In fact, if you look at like games we both haven't beaten, I think there's only a couple in there. So, but that doesn't, given my druthers, like I will abandon a game once it's, ceased showing me new things and lost my interest, just because, something we say a lot on the show is like, don't threaten me with boredom. I have like 300 unplayed Steam games. Like I have so many other games I'd rather be playing. Like don't, be respectful of my time. Don't try to threaten me with tedium because you're going to lose that standoff.
Mm-hmm.
So for the show, like I think we're both very diligent about doing it, getting to the end at the very least. But sometimes that's by hook or by crook, and we will use save states, or I've never outright like put in a cheat code for something, but we will use save states for old games, and we will skip side quests and stuff like that in newer games. If need be. If
there's something substantial to the game that's optional, like I think we'll both try and dip into it at least enough to talk about it. Maybe not in the most educated, like, oh, I went and did this crazy optional dungeon kind of way. But, I think that is the way completion is a manifest for us on this limited time scale. It's like, can we speak about this with any measure of authority to at least, make the episode some kind of artifact that can be, considered like, yeah, this is a periodical, right?
So your show goes all the way back to 2011. I know I haven't been listening to it that long, and you may have talked about this somewhat on the show, but I haven't gotten a chance to hear it. How did you guys get started with the show? Where did the inspiration for it come from, and how did you guys start working together on it?
Me and Kole were both working in separate podcast circles, and on the Something Awful forums, there was a podcast workshop thread that started up, and we listened to each other's stuff and liked it. And we started talking about doing a retro show because Kole does a show formerly called Stand There, Don't Tree and Riddle Me This, currently called The Level, where it's a modern game show. And I noticed he kept talking about like old games, and nobody else on the show had played them. and then we started that kind of conversation, like, oh, like I'd talk about Breath of Fire 3.
Sure.
Okay, I got nothing better to do.
I sent Gary a direct message one night. I was like, "Hey, do you want to do like a retro game show? Maybe about like 30 minutes."
Oh yeah, no sweat.
No big deal.
It's a small topic.
Yep. Yeah. So it kind of extended a little bit out of that. Yeah.
And did you start with games that you had both already played? Or was this from the start a project where you were playing games that you might not have played before, or replaying stuff?
Most of the games we do for the show, one of us has played, one or both of us, not always, but a lot of the time. And we started with the first episodes about Mega Man X, which we both had played, obviously, because we're cool dudes who like big games.
Of course.
But occasionally we will get something. So we did that, and then third episode we did Dark Corners of the Earth, which like I had played but Kole had not played. Like we'll do something like that where we'll introduce a game to one. Oh, you had played that before?
Yeah.
Maybe a better example, like early on we did Silent Hill 2, which I hadn't played. Bloodlines you hadn't played, right? Is that the case, or had you played that?
Not completion, no.
Yeah,
I got about like halfway through.
So we'll introduce each other to things from time to time as well. And then every once in a while we'll do something neither of us have played to completion. Like right now we're playing God Hand for the show. And sometimes that's like, or like when we did Sacrifice, which like that turned out, we didn't like that game very much. That's a one we both didn't beat. But this, like, we neither of us played it, and we're just like, this is fucking phenomenal. Like, this is so good.
Awesome.
And it's an amazing treat. Like, it just feels really, really good to kind of co-discover this thing and know that you have off in the future in a couple of weeks, you're going to have a chance to dork out about it and really, really drill deep about this thing that is new to you and you really love.
That's awesome. And did that suggestion come from sort of you guys' community? I know that your show has a pretty good little community around it with the Something Awful forums and stuff. Did that suggestion come from there with God Hand, or where did that come from?
You know what? I don't know. We have a little widget on our website where people can submit stuff, and I kind of keep track of that in a big spreadsheet, and bring stuff to the top that's mentioned to by a lot of people. Like when a lot of people suggest it, maybe it kind of came from there. But I think that both Gary and I had a little bit of like a distant curiosity about it, and so it just kind of by mystery bubbled up to the top. Is that right, Gary? Does that comport with your with your notions of how this happened?
I'm sure someone has suggested it before. Like, I feel like I remember someone mentioning it at some point, like, hey, you guys should do this. But we didn't have it. It wasn't a direct result. Like, we don't, for Watch Out for Fireballs, because of those scheduling things that we mentioned before, we don't run that entirely by listener suggestion. Like, we keep that big database Kole mentioned, but then we have our own Google spreadsheet where we kind of plan out the next, 6 months to a year and just kind of posit things and keep an ongoing conversation. Like, does this sound good? Does this sound like something you want to play? Because as the more, we go on, like, I think that we both become more conscious of the fact that when we take these things on, we're going to be spending a lot of our time with them, and we want them to be something that we'll enjoy. Not that we don't end up doing things that we don't like. And some of those are my favorite episodes where we're like, something just fails and just really fun to shit on it a little bit. But we both at least want to be interested going in. There's no point in choosing a game that we're going to try to like look at, be on one side of 20 hours and be like, yep, I got to get to that other side. And none of this sounds cool to me.
Yeah.
Right.
Does the show and on your other various shows kind of represent the majority of your gaming time? Or do you have other games that you play that aren't worth talking about on the air, but that you keep going back to?
I don't know if over the course of the past, 3-4 years, if I've ever played a game that I haven't talked about on the air. Because, there's the assignment play, but then there's also the level where that gets turned into regular discussion. But like assignment play represents a huge amount of the time that I spend, playing games.
Yeah, me too. I have more or less like I'll play games that I'm assigned for the show, and then I'll usually have kind of like my piece on the side, kind of like side game that I'm working on, or like special things will happen. Like, oh, there's a Dark Souls DLC. I'm going to make some time to play that. Or like, and that, I guess that's for the show too. Or
sort
like, when the Walking Dead episodes were coming out, or The Wolf Among Us, like I'll find time for those games. There are a couple exceptions, but the most part, I just work on my assignment games, and I have one thing kind of on the side that I'm working through.
We have that same kind of feeling, and I'd say most of the time I spend playing games these days is for the show. And in a sense, sometimes when I feel like when I find a long game that I don't feel like fits our show, or that we can't shoehorn in somehow into something that we'll talk about on air, I feel a little bit like I'm cheating. Like, we're talking about playing. Shane and I have been talking about trying the co-op of Divinity Original Sin, and it looks like a ton of fun, but it's a real long game, and I don't think I'm going to be able to find any way to fit it into the show apart from just generally mentioning it. So
Reagan, you're just going to have to rename the show.
It's funny that you bring that up, because that is my mistress game right now.
Oh, how are you liking it?
Oh, I love it. It's wonderful.
Well, I hope someday I get to hear you guys talk about it on the show.
I kind of have some questions I'd like to throw you guys' way, because I'd like to talk a little bit about, I think, kind of the intersection between what your listeners are after and what ours are. First, I just want to know a little bit about what kind of got you into retro gaming. How far back does your gaming memory stretch? My brother and I both, of course, we grew up together, and that meant that we were sharing a console and sharing our game library, and we were Sega kids. And
which means really it's kind of a huge handicap for us these days, because all the interesting gaming memories we have are about things like the terrible like Vector Man and things like that.
Oh, Vector Man's good.
Oh no, Vector Man's a pretty decent game, but I feel like sometimes it's a bit of a handicap. I never played Mega Man X when I was a kid. I've only played it as an adult fairly recently, and I have a different sort of level of attention span, and I think I'm just worse at games now than I was when I was a kid, or at least I don't dedicate myself to them sometimes in the same way. So some of those
Reagan,
games,
we keep coming back to the idea of games that respect your time, and no respect is needed when you're a kid.
That's true.
So
You haven't earned it.
yeah.
no.
Games don't need to respect me because I don't respect me, because my parents don't respect me, because my classmates don't respect me, because I'm a dumb little kid.
Sonic respects me.
Sonic understands him.
No, he doesn't. You've seen him tap his foot.
Oh man, you're right. Sonic has terrible disrespect. He's got a tood, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, by the way, I think that your Sonic 3 and Knuckles episode was a fantastic one. I've just recently been playing through that. Really enjoyed listening back to that episode again. But it doesn't sound like you guys. It sounds like you guys were both Nintendo kids. Am I right?
No, just
I
me.
was very much a Sega kid.
Oh right. I'm sorry. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was a Sega kid, and I was a Sega partisan in the console wars. However, I owned both, and so I had a pretty diverse set of experiences. I think if I had
you were
any
that
deficiencies, yeah, it was garbage kid is what we call them. If I had any deficiencies when I was real young, it was PC gaming. Just because I didn't get into that until I was, relatively a bit older, right? Like, let's say like late high school, college age kind of thing. So I think that's kind of the big blind spot that I have that Gary kind of shores up.
Yeah, and IU. Like I played Sega, but not when I was at that golden age. Like I bought a Genesis when I was like 19 just for myself. But as a kid, I just had Nintendo stuff and then some PC stuff, and then ended up going hard on PC. Like when I first had disposable income, like when I was like 19 or 20. So that's where I gained like a lot of that stuff.
And how do you game now? I'm guessing that if you're playing this many retro games, you're probably into the emulation scene, but I could be wrong. You could be just eBaying the heck out of it.
It's funny because you asked about collections, and like I used to have like a fairly decent collection of games, but then I moved across the country and didn't want to carry them. So I sold a lot of them off, thinking like, oh, this can be done digitally. I need to divest myself some of this attachment to these physical goods. So now, when we're doing old stuff, it is a lot of emulation. So I spend a lot of time at the PC, and then that's kind of my bag as far as my extracurricular games as well. So like I know I am more of a PC gamer guy than Kole. I think Kole spends a little bit more time on the couch. Is that fair? not like a dismissive way. Yeah, Cole's always sitting on his ass like that. I'm just off bench pressing laptops and surfing.
I love classism based on what kind of chair you opt to use.
I'm more of an Aeron gamer.
Yeah. Aeron Gamer. That sounds like the worst website.
Oh God.
It's weird because I had set aside some money in anticipation of the next generation, and I had been a console game kind of guy, like Xbox 360, PS3. We have all of them, but I invested all of that in a living room PC. Mm-hmm. So a great deal of the gaming that I do now is actually just in a recliner, treating a PC like a console. And then they announced Bloodborne as an exclusive, so I'm going to have to get a PlayStation 4.
For you.
But yeah, it is PC by way of a console like experience for me most of the time now.
So what do you if someone was going to be playing along with you, would that be their ideal setup? Would be get an old PC, drop some emulators on there, get a Logitech controller, and hook it up to the TV?
Probably not the ideal setup. Like I think that the times when I can play on actual hardware, like it is undeniably better and is a better experience and feels better. And there are ways you can kind of emulate that experience by getting controller adapters and such like that to actually get a SNES controller. For us, it is. I feel like it is definitely a compromise. So I don't think that's the ideal way to play along, but it is the easiest way. And when you're working in the volume that we're working in, it's the one that we can actually get done.
Definitely. Reagan's always bragging about his new Retron 5.
I'm not bragging about it. It is pretty cool, though. I recommend it, without a doubt.
Yeah.
It's been great, but it has kind of ignited my my eBay addiction a little bit lately, and it's an expensive habit if you really want to do that. But it's great. The console is terrific. I like it a lot.
It's funny how the way that collecting stuff changed, because it used to be, certain systems like used to not be expensive to kind of collect, the highlights for. Like when I was a early 20-year-old and was into getting all the SNES games I loved, like there were only a couple of them that were prohibitively expensive. And then now SNES collecting has gone collecting has gone, has gotten a little bit bigger. And at the time, PlayStation 1 games were dirt cheap. And now, PlayStation 1 games, especially RPGs and Atlas titles and stuff, are really expensive. So that kind of stuff evolves.
Yeah, and some of the SNES stuff is just absurdly priced now. It's really, really hard to get into that. I've kind of enjoyed that the Retron will let you buy a Super Famicom cartridge and it'll do IPS patches on the fly, so you can play a lot of the Japanese stuff. And I've even done that with some games that have American releases, but it's much cheaper to get the Super Famicom cartridge. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Something that's been really good for us, and another factor that figures into what games we pick, is just the amount of re-releases and stuff that happen. Whether it's by the PSN store or Virtual Console, and then general PC releases through GOG and stuff like that. Now is a really great time to have a show like ours, just because older games are a lot easier to get a hold of in a cost-effective way as possible. So that is a consideration. Like, God Hand, we would probably think twice about doing that if it wasn't $10 on PSN. Right. And it's only just recently that we've started like dipping into like gray market kind of stuff like Suikoden, not on PSN. It was announced for it. We banked on it being out by the time we played it. Wasn't the case. And so we try and be very conscientious about that. But we're willing to dip into it if it means that we can kind of broaden that experience.
True, yeah. The thing that stands out to me about Watch Out for Fireballs is how good your game design critique is. It's one of the things about your show that I just listen to and think, oh God, what am I doing? My show is an embarrassment compared to Watch Out for Fireballs, because
Come on, Ray.
Okay, you're right. We're awesome. Right. I'll be editing all of that out.
But you are worthy. You are worthy. You are worthy. There we go.
Thank you so much.
Imagine Mario looking at you instead of imagining Sonic looking at you.
Oh, okay.
Like, you're an adult now.
Yeah,
Mario's
right.
looking at you with his smile and his it's join to me.
It's a me.
And,
yes. Yeah. Thank you, guys. The thing that really stands out about your show to me is how competent and really clear your game design critiques or just analysis is. And kind of you guys really have a good sort of vocabulary for that sort of thing. So when you guys talk about a game, you're not just like a lot of game critique tends towards just, it's kind of like this game meets that game, but with a twist. Whereas you guys have a good way of kind of diving in and talking about the specifics of a game's design that stand out to you or that are really useful. And I kind of wondered if that was something that you guys had just sort of built as a part of chatting with each other over the years, or if there was something about that was... I'm not sure where this question is going, but how do you guys build that sort of game design vocabulary and give such a clear discussion of it?
It's I would chalk up to two things, and Cole, you can let me know if you disagree. One, I would say, is just practice, because we've been doing it for a long time. The second one being a function of the show, because we spend the whole, like, we're going to sit down for 2 hours and talk about this thing we both just went through. We have it in mind, and it's a luxury that's afforded to us. Like, we couldn't just say like, oh, it's just kind of like this and this, and then move on, because then we'd have no show and there'd be nothing to do after that. And I think that the real, if you listen to the early episodes, the real kind of moment to moment, granular demarcations of like stuff like that is kind of developed really quickly. But initially, I think that you listen to that Mega Man episode and that Myst episode and stuff, we were going to talk about the games a little bit more generally, a little bit more about their place in history. And we still do a little bit of that, but we kind of front and backload it and really are focusing on the, like, hey, this thing is at this point. How does that make you feel? What does that do? How does that reflect on the part that comes after? Things like that. Just because we're so zoomed in. Is really kind of the issue. And I think that both of us are more interested in that than like a kind of a broader news format. And then we do Bonfireside Chat, which is even more, that's that's essentially a show on a level of a game.
Yeah.
You know, like we really are interested in that, like the micro kind of lens as opposed to the macro lens of the stuff. And part of that I know is at least a little bit intentional because the macro lens is what gets talked about. I feel like a lot of the time, you know, a lot of gaming podcasts are like some dudes sitting around in a room. They're talking about the industry. They're kind of talking about those general trends. And then you have something like Retronauts where like they're talking about the history. Like those guys are museum curators. Like I love that show.
Yeah,
I've
absolutely.
been on a couple times. Like I'm big fans of those guys. But like they're historians. And what we want to do is actually just like take a really, really close look and analyze the actual thing that they're getting the broader context of. Does that jibe, Cole, or is that, am I speaking for you out of turn?
No, for sure, definitely jives. I don't know why I led with no when I was agreeing with you. It really is. You know, I just it's a product of doing a lot of it for a very long time, and so much of what we do, I would just call it kind of advanced paying attention. In kind of a really pithy way, because it's just a matter of playing it with a keen eye towards like forming an opinion about it that can be tested not on the show as we talk about it, but throughout the rest of the game as we play it. Mm-hmm. Right. So actually like having that initial kind of gut feeling and then have it be, hopefully sharpened and honed and crystallized and metaphor mixed, by the time the notes come together and by the time we actually kind of like sit down and test our impressions against each other, it really is just a matter of kind of developing that eye. Right.
Do you often agree, or do you find yourselves disagreeing a lot on the finer points of a game?
It's a lot of like when we disagree, it's a lot of shades of gray.
Yeah,
like it's a lot of like I would have given this a gray value of 2, and Cole gave it a gray value of 3.
Jackass.
Yeah. It's mostly us agreeing loudly, I think. Yeah.
Do you take a lot of notes as you work your way through a game? Like, do you pause every 30 seconds and write down a thought, or how does that work for you?
I'm guilty of that more so than Gary is, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, Gary.
No, yeah, I will write something up that is specifically noteworthy, but most of the stuff I keep in my noggin.
Yeah. So I have I have notebooks and like note cards and stuff that I kind of like keep track of just the beats really, mm-hmm. and anything like quote wise or just like I want to make sure that this gets represented, because when those get put together into an outline for the show, like that, the purpose that serves is for us to kind of have an idea of what the track is. Broken down by area. And if we run through, talking about one thing, we're like, okay, what's next? Having that as reference to be like, oh, and also this was here.
Yeah. And it's super helpful to me. Like I don't actually contribute to that process, but it helps me out a lot too, because sometimes, if I get to the gray middle of a game and it's just kind of gooey and there's not that much, new that's being introduced, I'll be reminded because Cole's kept really good notes, and I take advantage of that because I know he's going to do it anyway. So I just let him do it. Yeah. And then so, I'll remember things that aren't in the notes, like with some frequency too. Like I'm not contributing to that part.
Yeah.
I've been looking at ways to kind of improve this angle of our show, and I've been trying to do some reading about, trying to find some good resources where I can do some reading about game design and kind of improve the. I just kind of want to step up our game here. I've been reading a couple of books. There's a good one called Game Design Companion that's a critical analysis of Wario Land 4 that dives in and talks about moment by moment. Oh, if you haven't checked it out, I totally recommend it. It's really cool. Basically, it's a kind of a book that tries to lay out a specific vocabulary. It's kind of in a textbook format, and it tries to lay out a specific vocabulary for game design and talking about game design.
This is news to me that anyone would make a Wario Land textbook. Amuses me.
People
to no
teach
end.
game design in colleges now and stuff, and I guess that's a thing. They need books to use.
I minored in Wario
Oh,
Land.
There's another more recent book that's called A Game Design Vocabulary by Anna Anthropy and Naomi Clark that I've just read a chapter of and have ordered off of Amazon and haven't actually received yet. But I definitely recommend the book on Wario Land 4 that is just a fantastic. Like, that's such a simple game. I don't recall, I don't remember if you guys have done an episode on it or not, but it's such a simple game. It's an incredibly fun little game without a whole lot to it. It's got just a few simple mechanics, and yet it kind of breaks that apart and really goes into each. It's kind of like an extremely extended episode of your show, but through the lens of trying to develop very specific vocabulary for talking about game design. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I've got the ebook of it, but I haven't started it yet. I heard about that show first on Retronauts. They did a Wario Land episode and talked about it, and I love Wario Land 4. I just haven't read the book yet.
I think I came across it because there's a podcast called the Racket Boy podcast. Racket Boy is a gaming forum, and they did an interview with the guy who wrote that book, and it was actually a kind of a boring interview. I hope that they don't listen to this. But the interview was really just sort of hammered home what an academic this guy was who wrote it. And so I was fascinated by the idea that this kind of stuffy academic guy had written a whole book about Wario Land 4. And so, yeah, really cool stuff.
I just love it when stuffy academics suck all the fun out of things.
Like Watch Out for Fireballs. That show is
yeah. Well, it's funny that you bring that up because you said a lot of nice things about the show, and I appreciate it. And it's funny because the show is like for certain people, and some people are bored to tears by it. Like we will get feedback on the Something Awful forums or something of people who are just like, this is not for me. Like this is boring, and I don't want someone to go all the just kind of go through a game like that. Like we've gotten reviews to that effect. A couple of things like that. Like it is some people do feel like we are just sucking the fun out of a game. Just kind of funny that you bring that up. Like
we've gotten a lot of, at least early on, we got a lot of feedback about spoilers. And I thought if we're getting that kind of feedback, you guys are definitely getting feedback about that.
What's funny is along with that feedback, we get a lot of people saying, oh my gosh, I love this because I can vicariously experience these games that I otherwise would not have been able to play, or revisit these games that I hadn't been able to play. So there exists a certain stripe of person out there in our audience who listens to us and wants those spoilers. Because we have found this weird niche in this ecosystem.
Our compromise on that, and we got a lot of negative feedback about that early on, and so our compromise on that, because I really want to go into the depth and talk about details of the plot and endings and things like that on our show, is that we kind of put in a incomparable style spoiler break,
spoiler horn.
Yeah, and we do that about midway through each episode and try and but actually trying to figure out what stuff to talk about beforehand and what stuff to talk about afterward is always this constant juggling act, and it's very difficult. So I kind of admire that you guys kind of just let it go, and if you're not interested in hearing about spoilers, maybe you stop after the skit at the beginning of the show.
We go into it with the assumption that people who are listening to the episode want to hear about it.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah. And I've read somewhere, maybe I'm imagining this now, but that spoilers do in fact enhance people's enjoyment of things. I've found that's in many cases true. I mean, with the possible exception of The Sixth Sense, you're gonna go into it knowing what to expect, and if you know you're expecting something that you're gonna like, I think it improves the experience.
Is The Sixth Sense the one where the ghost turned out to be Kaiser Soge? Sorry.
That's right.
Yeah. A lot of spoilers and a lot of things that people call like, oh my gosh, spoilers. They don't make any sense if you don't know the thing that you're talking about. So if I encounter a spoiler for something that I'm completely unfamiliar with, by the time I get to the thing that it's spoiling, I don't have any recollection of it. Or it's just a vague, oh, that thing.
Yeah. Gives you more of a kind of a recognition, high. It's like, oh, right. I didn't understand that before when somebody tried to spoil it for me. And now I do. And now it makes a lot of sense. So,
yeah.
There's also an element of like people who are really sensitive about spoilers. It suggests a real adversarial relationship between them and art, where they want to figure out the twist. Like, this is the filmmaker trying to fool me. I'm going to try to outsmart them. And if I saw, the people who see a movie and they're just like, I knew that thing was going to happen, and they dismiss the entire movie based on that. There's this weird attitude of it just being versus the art, as opposed to being like, okay, like I'm going to be told a story, and I obviously it is, it shouldn't even need to be said that it's so important how it's told, not just what happens.
Last night I was at a theme park for one of these Halloween things, and there was a kid standing in the line, and a guy walks up wearing a skeleton mask, And this little kid just says, "That's not a real skeleton. That's not real at all."
He's a phony.
Yeah.
And that's
Like,
kind of what I hear sometimes when I hear these kinds of complaints.
What kind of adult are you going to grow up into?
I definitely understand the kind of the counter argument though, because there are certainly parts in games that I wouldn't want to have revealed for me ahead of time. You know, if it's a game that's a puzzle game, you know, where part of the enjoyment of the game is that experience of discovery. You know, you guys mentioned you did Myst early on, and we just recently did Year Walk. It's a similar like adventure style puzzle game.
Love that game.
And I think in some genres, in some kinds of games, there's definitely certain things that I personally wouldn't reveal to somebody who was going to play it.
The truth is somewhere like in the middle, and there's some things that you will get. The truth is in the middle. You will get more enjoyment out of not knowing, and so mechanical spoilers like make a kind of sense. But with our show, it's always positive. I'm like, if you're going to play the game, like if you're going to play the game at all, you should play it before you listen to our show.
Yeah.
If you're not going to play it, then dive in.
Oh, yeah. No, I was just going to say solution spoilers are kind of a dick move. Like just kind of like, oh, that puzzle where you had to flip-flop the jibbity-doo? Yeah, okay, cool. That to me is like, oh, great.
Not
like
a walkthrough show.
It sucks the wind out of the sails, which we do that. Like, we'll say, oh, the trick about this puzzle here was, because we have to talk about it, like because if the solution was, either really elegant, we want to praise it, and if it was really, like, oh, some bullshit, can we swear? I'm sorry.
Yes, yeah, you're completely fine.
Okay. So if the solution was some fucking bullshit, okay. Then
I've been counting. You're under our swear limit.
Cool.
I'll cut you off though.
SPM, yeah, yeah. So like, if the solution's bullshit, we want to say it. But again, like if somebody's out there listening to this thinking, okay, I would like to know more of these guys, and I'm a little bit worried about spoilers. Like maybe the first 20 minutes of our show in an incomparable like fashion, like we hit those generalities, and then it's very clear when we say, all right, let's get to it. They can like get into it. And oftentimes if we're talking about something that's especially plot heavy, like like an adventure game or an RPG where kind of the fun of the moment to moment is revealing those story beats, we'll actually like dispense with talking about the plot and the generalities and pepper that in throughout the entire experience. So there is a little bit of a safe zone. It's just not clearly demarcated by a horn, right?
And you can't talk about the process of coming upon a solution without talking about the solution itself. And the whole show is about us, like, the game is asking us to do this. How did we figure it out? How is the game teaching us to do it? And we can't do that without actually saying what it is.
Yeah.
So we end up going into that stuff.
You'd end up talking in a lot of circles. So part of my favorite thing about talking to other podcasters and specifically people like you guys who've played just a ton of games is that you can do a little bit of my job for me and maybe recommend to some of our listeners games that you think might fit our kind of wheelhouse. So what we look for when we choose games for our show would be games that that a non-Uber gamer type person, somebody who can, who's played some games but maybe isn't wired to their keyboard directly with a neural link or something.
Their mechanical keyboard, Reagan?
Of course. I mean, is there another kind? That somebody like that can pick up and play and complete in probably like, under a week or maybe a weekend or 2 or 3 evenings, something like that. And I know, like we talked about this earlier, my biggest sort of blind spot is retro games, particularly the Nintendo side of them, because I didn't get to play those as a kid. I've tried to go back and explore that more recently, but I was hoping maybe we could spend a minute talking about some games you think might fit that format.
Yeah, like specifically old games that like are kind of pick up and play.
No, we cover everything, so I'd be happy to hear your recommendations about any of those. But
you did a little bit of like, because you had mentioned when you sent us an email, it said like you're going to ask us about some short games, and what I tried to think about for that were like genres that tend to be really like short examples of genres that are really long.
Oh, that's great.
So because sometimes I want like a certain kind of experience, but the only way to get it is like, this pretty insane commitment. So I thought of a couple of things like one game, because one of our favorite games that we've done for the show is Final Fantasy Tactics. And if you want that kind of experience, I can't really talk enough sugar about Shadowrun Returns Dragonfall, which came out this year. It is a tactical RPG that is real manageable. Like it is, you could beat it in a week. You could probably beat it in a weekend if you've got some time, a little bit of time to set aside. It's probably like 10 hours, 10, 11 hours. But that game is really phenomenal and is like a bite-sized version of an experience that's kind of hard to get.
That's awesome, because that's something that
part of my background is tabletop RPGs, and Shadowrun is one of my absolute favorite experiences like that. So
and that's been on my list.
Shoot right to the top of my list.
Yeah, that's definitely been on my list, but it's not. I wasn't really aware that it was short. I always feel like, I was really into some of the Final Fantasy Tactics stuff and other similar games, but I've never found one that I felt like would be good for the show. That's a great recommendation. Thank you very much.
You want to ping pong, Cole? Do you got something?
Yeah, sure. So since I currently just got finished playing Resident Evil for the show, we're going to be doing that here in a couple of weeks, and so I'm coming into this with that, and also Neverending Nightmares in my noggin, right? And my general abiding love for horror games, I think a small part of that is also an appreciation for the fact that a lot of them are just really, really short.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for like experiences that are in the sub 10-hour range, you could do a lot worse than like going and picking up the Silent Hill HD collection. Like you have Silent Hill 2 and 3, and those are some of the best horror games ever made, and they both clock in at just under like 10 hours. So that's kind of the retro side of things. I don't know if I'd recommend Neverending Nightmares, like just straight out of without any recognition of like anybody's affinity for that genre. But that is also another option that's out there. But yeah, like horror games, if you look into those, they do tend to be shorter, to re-summarize what I just said. Sorry.
We have not covered a horror game, and we were actually intending to cover one. We thought we might be interested in Outlast, and so I
guess it depends if you consider Year Walk horror.
Well, I guess that's true. But yeah, we were going to play Outlast for the show, and I didn't get into it. But I have been definitely looking for another horror game to... I didn't think I had enough to say about Outlast. I thought it was fine, but it was, I wasn't into it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good recommendation. I should go back and play some of those again and give that another shot. And that's true, Shane. Yeah, Year Walk is kind of horror-y, I guess. And I definitely liked that aspect of it. So yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Penumbra is really great, outstanding too for old short horror game. The Penumbra series. And
Amnesia as well.
I'm not sure I'm familiar with that, but the name sounds familiar enough that I bet it's in my Steam library completely untouched. Was that in a bundle at some point?
Amnesia is scary as shit.
Oh, Amnesia.
Yeah. Outlast, I'd say it's comparable in frightened to Outlast.
Yeah, but mechanically more interesting than Outlast. And narratively more interesting than Outlast.
Yeah, I thought the narrative of Outlast was where it was kind of like I've been through, I don't know, one too many spooky asylums, and I kind of felt it was a little samey to me, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm. If you guys are looking for, again, just another short thing, like when I was kind of brainstorming, have you guys done Transistor on the show?
Yes, we did. Oh my gosh, such an amazing game.
I thought maybe you guys had, like I looked at the list of things, I thought maybe so, but I wanted to make sure if not, because that's I was really impressed by the kind of brevity and economy of that game, and it's fantastic. So
yeah,
this has been such an amazing year for games.
It has been. Transistor was a great one. I just loved the combat system in that game. I'll put a link in the show notes to our episode.
Transistor is the first game in a long time that I played the whole way through in just a little over one sitting, and then continued to play long into the night a second playthrough on the kind of New Game Plus, just because I just could not put that game down.
Yeah. I don't usually do New Game Pluses because obviously with kind of the tone of our show, we're trying to dive into games, get as much out of them as we can in a relatively short time, and then move on. And sometimes that can mean that I don't get a chance to do those additional things. But yeah, Transistor was one where I couldn't help but play through it a second time. It was fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so good. Airtight.
Yep.
Well, thank you guys so much for coming on the show. I know I've really been looking forward to this because your show has been an inspiration for our show for a while, and I've really respect the work you guys do there. I'll make sure we have tons of links to Watch Out for Fireballs, maybe some particular episodes. There's probably some of our listeners who haven't had a chance to check out Watch Out for Fireballs yet. Are there any particular episodes that you would point them to as a good jumping on point for somebody who's interested in checking out your show?
Like pick a game that you like already, that you don't mind having spoiled. And then other than that, like if you're not worried about that, like what are the kind of I think the Eternal Darkness one's really fun.
Yeah.
Because we fucked around with the format a little bit on that one.
Yeah.
What else, Cole? What am I missing?
Looking here recently, the Alpha Protocol episode is really good. And that extra so we do a main episode, and then we do kind of like off week episodes where we do listener responses. And in that case, we interviewed Chris Avallone, noted game design hero Chris Avallone, and noted really nice dude on that extra episode as well. So if you're curious about one of those longer experiences, I feel like we have a lot of good stuff to say in that, and also that interview is really good.
Yeah, and definitely if you're listening and haven't checked those out, don't skip the extra sods. They're full of really fun stuff. They're awesome.
Can I just say, when I jumped onto your show, it was the Sonic the Hedgehog hog one, and so the very first thing I heard was that Sonic fanfic sketch, and it almost scared me away, guys. I gotta say,
there's been a long contentious history with those little opening sketch things where like people either like them or people really, really dislike them. and what we eventually like realized was like, we like doing them, so we want to keep doing them. But there are probably people who just sit down and listen to this and think that's all that it is.
Yeah. 2.5 hours of that.
Yeah, just 2.5 hours of, and
I want to hear I want to hear the conclusion of the Sonic the Hedgehog saga. Did he get his ring?
And then for a little while, the compromise we came up with was like, okay, at the beginning of every episode, let's say what the episode is about, and then say we're going into a sketch so we don't break anyone's immersion. And then we started the Patreon campaign, and that took our first part. So now people could just literally think that people are patronizing us, essentially just to, make off-color, Sonic sex jokes for
Sonic sex joke theater of the mind.
Yeah.
I would subscribe to that podcast.
Yeah.
Well, and of course, we should plug your Patreon, which is running now. If you go to patreon.com and search for them, Watch Out for Fireballs, you'll find that you can support the great work they're doing over there, as well as get some, I don't know what, stickers or something, right? Something.
Whatever you people
whatever those people get.
Tote bags.
Yeah. There's all kinds of bags.
It's the NPR of podcasting funding models, and it seems to be working. How's that been working out for you guys, by the way?
Great.
Awesome.
Yeah, people have been amazingly supportive. It's really touching.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it. And it's awesome because like early on, this show cost us money, like not insignificant money to do, between buying games and between just like hosting costs and stuff like that. And this at the very least has allowed us to do some extra stuff and made it not cost us money, which is cool because, as previously discussed for the last hour, we spent a lot of time on it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Well, so I guess now will be a good time for us to wrap it up. I'm really bad with the outros as well as the intros, so
Well, I'll outro us.
Oh, go for it.
Guys, I am just incredibly appreciative of you spending the time to come on our show. Reagan and I, as we've said, are both big fans of what you do, and gonna keep listening, so thank you guys so much.
Where can people follow you guys or find you on the interwebs?
Well, first, just real quick, that's immensely flattering. So thank you guys very much for saying that. Like, and doing this experience has been very flattering, and I can hopefully speak for Cole. I'm really happy to do it.
Yeah.
So it's been a lot of fun, and the pleasure is ours. So
Thank you.
For sure.
You can find me on Twitter, WAF Podcast, which is the official one that I'm bad at updating. But you can follow me personally, which I'm better at updating, at Gary Buh, GaryBuh. They
had a character limit, huh?
Yeah, I'm making fun of myself. The Buh is how I end anything where it's me being dumb. So.
You can find me on Twitter. I am at Kole Ross. It's a non-standard spelling, KOLEROSS.
And of course, you can find our show on Twitter. We are @_short game. We couldn't get the short game because of these stupid. There's a documentary about
golf.
Golf, exactly. Young people playing golf. therefore, the
Oh,
short.
it's a short game?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a documentary on Netflix. I can't recommend it. But you can follow us on Twitter at _shortgame, or of course you can find our website at www.theshortgame.net. You can find me personally on Twitter at Reagan K, which is spelled funny. It's RayGank. And Shane,
Reagan.
yes, exactly. And Shane, where can people find you?
I am at 8-Bit Shane.
And of course, we were not joined this week by our third co-host who couldn't be here. That is Nate Heininger, and you can follow. If for some reason this episode made you want to follow the guy who wasn't here, he's at.
Hey guys, what did I miss? Oh, hey Nate.
We'll edit him in. He had some really insightful questions, guys. Thanks for your responses to those. And that's Nate Heininger. I think you could follow him at. I don't even remember his. I'll edit that in later. All right, and. You can join us next week when we should be talking about...
Nate STL.
Oh.
Is his Twitter.
There we are. And you can join us next week when I think we're going to be talking about Little Inferno. Is that right, Shane?
That's right.
Oh, that's fantastic, guys.
Love that
yeah.
game.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful game.
Yeah.
Good choice.
Cool. Well, I'm glad we have your approval.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I don't mean
No.
like, do whatever you want.
No, I mean that sincerely. And watch out for fireballs, I guess.